courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 529. I am Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. With me, as always, my co-host Derek, DP3 in the forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, as you and our listeners can hear, I'm a little under the weather this week, but nevertheless, good to be talking basketball gaming and basketball with you. To that point, what's on the agenda this week?
This is Andrew's flu podcast.
Yes.
So everybody appreciates this. So we have three topics on the agenda for this episode. First, we will discuss a recent session Andrew and I had on NBA 2K19, followed by our new NBA Jam on Fire Edition road trip using John Z1's Legends on Fire Edition mod, and we played a bunch of games on that road trip today. After that, we will discuss Take-Two's statements related to NBA 2K24 from their quarterly earnings call and why it should be concerning for gamers. And lastly, we will be going over this week's mailbag, where we discuss the stars that were hardest to use in basketball video games. And this topic was suggested by Lava One legend Nate Stasio. So thank you for that. But yeah, Andrew, we connected on a couple different games today. First, we started with NBA 2K19, and we used the 85-86 season mod, which is part of the Stildo 33 Classic seasons that were created for that game, and we used the Bulls versus the Nets. And on that Bulls team, obviously top scorers are Orlando Woolridge and Michael Jordan, but we also have Kyle Macy, who was one of the league leaders in three-point percentage that year. He shot over 40%. We have rim protection with Juwan Oldham and some mid-range shooting with Dave Corzine, and the team really isn't bad to use in video games. We also have George Gervin on that team, who averaged 16 points a game and started most of the year in Jordan's absence. Because if you remember correctly, Jordan broke his foot that year and only played 17 season games. This is also the season, though, where they lost to Boston in the first round of the playoffs, and Jordan scored 63 points in Game 2 of that series on April 20th, 1986. But yeah, that Bulls team, pretty good to use in video games. It's an athletic team. It's an up and down team. Like, they love to run the floor. And in that game, Jordan had 58 points for us in 6-minute quarters, Andrew, including a few like really nice dunks at the end of the game that helped us get the win.
Well, MJ is always fun to use in video games, obviously, but how funny is it to see Oldham sporting number 33 on the Bulls? You're just used to seeing Pippen, but yeah, you go back to the 86 Bulls and you see him wearing 33 instead.
He was such a strange player because I've watched some full games of that 85-86 team, and Oldham really didn't give you anything as far as smooth offense. He had an awkward shot. Most of his shots at the rim looked kind of wild, but he was an excellent athlete. And he played so many minutes for that team and started a bunch of games because of his athleticism and his length. And just kind of like in real life, in the video game, Oldham is very limited outside of that athleticism and kind of like being a drop-down guy or a lob threat, etc. So as I stated, we played against the Nets, Andrew. And what an interesting Nets team. So they won 39 games in real life, and they lost to the Bucks in the first round of the playoffs in a sweep. That Bucks team was excellent, as you know. The Bucks were so good in the mid-'80s, led by Terry Cummings and Sidney Moncrief. But this team is actually a really fun video game team because you have Michael Ray Richardson on that team. And he got banned for life from the league after 47 games in that season due to repeatedly violating the league's substance abuse policy. But he was having another strong season, so he's good in the game. 15.7 points per game, 7.2 assists per game, and 5.3 rebounds per game. And he's a great pickpocket, good at steals, good at defense, and whatnot. But they also had Mike Jaminski, a big lumbering big man who could put the ball in the hole and hit that mid-range shot. And he led the way for them with 16 points in that game. But they had Michael Ray Richardson, Mike Jaminski, Buck Williams, who is one of my favorite players of all time. His one-handed hammer dunks, his versatility, his athleticism. Absolutely love Buck Williams. He averaged 15.9 points per game and 12 rebounds per game for the Nets that year. They also had Otis Birdsong, who could always light it up and average 16.5 that season. Otis Birdsong, Andrew, if you go on YouTube and you watch full games or just his highlights and whatnot, what a quick release, what a sniper. He reminds me of kind of like a taller Norm Nixon with even more range. And it's not surprising to me that he averaged 20 plus points per game in his career at different points because, man, what a gunner. And he's really fun to use in that video game with the new signature shot that I gave him and kind of updating his ratings for that roster and whatnot. But they also had Albert King, who averaged 14.3 points per game, and a benched Daryl Dawkins. So Daryl Dawkins came off the bench that year, but averaged his second highest points per game of his career at averaging 15.3. He was only, I want to say, 29 years old or something like that. He was in his prime, and he could still throw it down and all of that stuff. So if you remember correctly, late in that game, I think it was towards the end of the third quarter and in the fourth quarter, he was giving us fits. He was throwing it down on us constantly, and it felt very realistic. But yeah, that Nets team is a fun team to put on the floor and to play against in that video game. But we beat that team with the heroics of Michael Jordan.
Definitely a couple of underdog teams from that year. A great matchup that you picked there. And that mod is just so detailed, so well done. We've said it before, but that whole project, that whole Classic Seasons mod for NBA 2K19 that Pseudo33 and company have put together, I know you're involved with that as well. And I love that with the retro season mods.
Yeah, so the one that we experienced today is with my edits to attributes, tendencies, badges, signatures, all of that stuff. And my brother and I have been working diligently on this roster over the last, I don't know, probably 3 to 4 weeks in order to make it perfect from both an art and attributes and signatures perspective. And then when I'm done with all of these edits, I'm sending it to Stildo in order to put some final touches on it and then, release the 85-86 again and then work his way up and, using that accuracy for the seasons following it. So I felt like it played incredibly well. I thought that the pace was great. You messaged me on Twitter during the game and you said this feels like real 80s action, right? Because the 80s was really fast and physical, right? Up and down constantly. Even off of made baskets, it was a quick outlet and sprinting up the floor. If you want to see what I'm talking about to our listeners, go look at some 85-86 footage of that Nets team, or really any NBA team, but like the Nets, the Mavericks, the Nuggets, the Cavaliers, etc. It is get up and go constantly. And it's so fun to watch. I love the 80s NBA because of that ridiculous pace.
Just love that scramble we had under the hoop and finally got a basket out of it. That felt very satisfying. A couple of great defensive plays back-to-back with George Gervin and MJ to get some quick buckets. They had a bit of an early lead on us, the 86 Nets there, but we did pull it out. And MJ, again, just as you said, having those signature dunks, just so satisfying to pull off. Really looking forward to watching the highlights back again.
I was happy to throw that alley-oop to, I think it was Kyle Macy to Orlando Woolridge in the first quarter, and you caught it in the air and did a reverse dunk to finish off the oop. Woolridge had his deficiencies on defense. That's well documented, right? But what a versatile guy in real life and in video games on the offensive end. So he was close to 6'10", and he could be slotted in at small forward or power forward, or in video games, you can get away with putting him in at shooting guard. And he was just a super athlete, which is why they called him and Jordan net busters when they joined forces in Chicago. I mean, he's listed at 6'9", 215, but he averaged 20 points a game 4 times in his career, 22.9, 20.7, 20.7 again, and then 25.1 in 90-91 when he was age 31. And he had a couple decent rebounding years as well, 6.8, 5.6, and had a 1.3 steals per game in 90-91. So he definitely could put up numbers in his career, and he also shot 51.3% from the field for his career. And a lot of people probably don't know that because people like to talk down about Orlando Woolridge, right? Because he's part of Jordan's mid-'80s squads, right? That a lot of people think that may have underachieved and whatnot. But Woolridge if you go watch highlights on YouTube and you go watch some full games, he was a super threat from mid-range. He would consistently hit mid-range shots. He was always on the break. He was always throwing it down. He had some back to the basket moves and whatnot and finger rolls at the rim. He is a super fun player to use in video games, and he was super fun to watch in real life. I think Orlando Woolridge is criminally underrated at this point.
Went between the legs in a dunk contest.
I think that was the first time they said that it ever happened. He was the first to ever do it. So our next session, Andrew, was on NBA Jam on Fire Edition, and this is using the PS3 emulator and also using the amazing John Z1 Legends on Fire Edition mod, where not only did he add a ton of classic teams to this game, but he also made a custom road trip. This must have taken thousands of hours of work, Andrew.
Easily.
This is ridiculous. But he made a custom road trip where you can recreate some of the greatest matchups that ever happened in basketball history throughout that road trip. So we started this off using the Trailblazers versus the Nuggets. And this was a famous 2019 matchup where the series went 7 games, and it was the Western Conference semifinals. We got killed. So we were using Lillard and McCollum. The way he has it set up, the game locks you in to using them to start out the game. And I was McCollum and you were Lillard, and we were against Jokic and Jamal Murray. And how tough is Jokic and Murray in this mod? Murray hardly ever misses from the outside, but Jokic just blocks everything, and he's always shoving you, and he was stretching the floor and hitting threes on us. He has a great shot animation assigned to Jokic where it looks exactly like his real shot in real life, where he kind of pumps it back behind his head and just kind of lofts it up towards the rim. But we got absolutely demolished in that first game. Why? Because we were short, Andrew.
Yes.
We had absolutely no rim protection. We had no way to block Jokic. We had no way to stop their alley-oops. Every single time we took a shot on Jokic from the outside, he was blocking us, even if we tried to do like a quick release. I can't begin to tell our listeners who haven't played this game how important it is to have a big guy represented on your team, especially in matchups like this. So, yeah, we lost the first 2 or 3 games just trying to use Lillard and McCollum, Andrew.
Yeah, and it's as you say, we're locked to those 2 players. Normally we select players that suit our strengths and our playing style, that chemistry that we've developed with that 1-2 punch that we have. And normally I am using a big man, and I wasn't able to on this occasion, at least out for the first 2 quarters. And it definitely did kill us, not being able to shove, not being able to block as I normally do. Yeah, it certainly made it a lot tougher. And the AI in that revamped road trip is just, it's merciless, Derek. It is absolutely brutal. And that is cool. Obviously, it does make it a very challenging remix of the mode. Some people have suggested that it should be a little bit easier. I know that John Z1 is kind of taking some suggestions on board there and weighing up the possibilities. And I think there might be some tweaks that you can make. I'd have to double-check the release notes on that. But yeah, having that super hard mode, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I love it. And, basically with the default road trip that's in the game, you have like your bronze and silver challenges, then your gold challenge, etc. And you'd always go into the bronze challenge knowing that you were going to get an easy game, right? You were going to blow up the computer and you could just have some fun. But there's no such thing in this revamped road trip. That's not an actual bronze challenge. That's basically like a gold or platinum challenge every single game. And what ended up happening was, and the way we got past this challenge is we used Lillard and McCollum for the first half of a game, and we were down by 16 at the half. And I messaged Andrew on Twitter, and I said, Andrew, switch to Nurkic, and I'll use Lillard. So we swapped, and Andrew now had a big guy he could use, and I had Lillard. And we beat them by 18 points in the second half in order to get that win by 2. And you with Nurkic, where you were just swatting everything at the rim, you were pushing people at the hoop and then going up for alley-oops, which we love to do. I was ripping steals in the backcourt with Lillard like I do with Gary Payton and whatnot. And that's the formula, right? that's the best formula for us, and that's the best formula probably for anybody playing co-op in NBA Jam on Fire Edition. So we were able to get that win. So the next game we had on NBA Jam on Fire Edition was probably the most satisfying game we had, and that was us recreating the 1992 Eastern Conference Finals matchup between the Bulls and the Cavaliers. The Bulls won that series 4-2, and then ended up beating the Portland Trail Blazers in the NBA Finals 4-2. But this game went to overtime and once again took Jordan heroics. And I was using Jordan throughout this game. You were using Pippen. And I think I caught fire with Jordan at the beginning of overtime, and I kept it for most of the overtime, and it made us win by, I think, 6 or 8 points and whatnot. And that game is up on the NLSC YouTube at this time. But yeah, using Jordan in that mod with his real cyberface, because you remember he wasn't in the game by default, and doing Jordan dunks where he sticks his tongue out and whatnot. He does the Jordan Jumpman dunk, right? And I just think that mod is incredible. I think that the way the Bulls look and feel on the court is excellent. You were playing some amazing defense with Scottie Pippen, and Mark Price scared us a little bit because he was catching fire from three and he was hitting a bunch of threes all over the court, which is incredibly realistic. But yeah, Jordan and Pippen winning that game in overtime versus that deadly Cavs team, that was probably my favorite game of the day.
And you came up huge with MJ in that fourth quarter there, hitting a big shot to send us into overtime, just totally dominating in the overtime, catching fire, so appropriate, obviously. And yeah, what a Jordan-esque performance.
Yeah, the thing is that in real life, Jordan was so dominant and his game was so aesthetically pleasing to the eye, and he just had so many different moves. And, he could go into the post. He had the mid-range game. He actually shot an excellent percentage from three in the playoffs throughout his career, like his career playoff percentage. And, he could put the ball on the floor. He obviously had the best moves I've ever seen around the rim. Just like his overall package is so great in real life. So when you get into a video game, you just want to be able to do all that stuff, right? You want to be able to dominate with MJ. And it was nice that we were able to completely dominate with him during that NBA 2K19 session, using the 85-86 roster, and then dominate the Cavs like he did in real life using NBA Jam on Fire Edition. The next game that we had, we were using Pierce and Garnett versus Sheed and Billups. This was the 2008 Eastern Conference Final matchup, which was a win for the Celtics. They won that series 4-2, and then obviously went on to win the NBA championship, beating the Lakers in the finals. But yeah, you had the big guy, Andrew. You were using Garnett in the second half of that game, and with me on Pierce, being able to get some steals in the backcourt once again, and being able to be tall enough to shoot over the defense, we were able to pull out that win. But Billups was hitting some off-balance threes and just being an absolute pain in the butt as an opponent. And I really like what John Z1 did with that mod, because I feel like the players that we're playing against are kind of playing to their strengths that they had in real life.
Very challenging. Another clutch win. That is the case with this mod, is that you don't get a lot of blowout victories, especially in road trip. Getting that last second block on Billups was very satisfying. You messaged me afterwards, just take that, Billups. It was it was quite funny.
Yeah, so the last two possessions of the game, it was me using Pierce hitting a three to put us up by 2 because we were down by 1. And then Billups attempted a last-second shot on the other end, and I just swatted him to the ground. And that was incredibly satisfying because the Pistons were so deadly in the mid-late 2000s. And they were always a threat to the Celtics. So it was nice to take them down on the virtual hardwood. And then the last matchup, the 76ers versus the Raptors. And this is just kind of a mashup of players for both teams. Iverson's with Mutombo there, but on the bench for that team, they have Iguodala as an option. And then for the Raptors, they actually have Vince Carter with Chris Bosh side by side. They did play together in 03, 04 and whatnot, but obviously they never went against Iverson and Mutombo together. So this was really interesting because we struggled mightily in the first half. I think we were down by double figures because Iverson, you couldn't even really get a shot off with him, Andrew. Constantly getting blocked by Carter, constantly getting blocked by Bosch. And I think that's one of the weaknesses in that game. It's when you use somebody short like Iverson, who in real life could get a shot off whenever he wanted, right? He averaged 33 points a game in the mid 2000s. But in that game, if you try to pull up from the outside, or even if you try to pull off like an off balance shot, it's getting swatted back into your face. So in a big way in that first half, we had to depend on you with Dikembe Mutombo kind of going up for oops and scoring, and even doing little like basic crossovers with him in order to create separation with your defender. And you actually had a key one right at the end of the game with Mutombo that clinched it, where you crossed over your defender and then threw it down with a one-handed hammer. But the reason we actually won this game was because at halftime, I made the decision to bench prime Allen Iverson for Andre Iguodala. And what does Iguodala give you? Size. He gives you length. He gives you height. He allows you to be able to, shoot over the defense. And I hit a couple key threes with him there. He still has a high steal rating, so you're still getting those steals in the backcourt. You're blocking more shots. When you shove somebody, they might drop the ball. So, in that game, it's just imperative to have size, right? And Iverson didn't give us that. So, unfortunately, I had to bench Iverson, and that won us the game.
Yeah, not usually the strategy that you'd go with, but it's true. He's not as effective as you would like, at least with the AI being that aggressive. And I was trying to not spin and crossover as much as I was. As you noted, I was getting shoved a lot. It seemed whatever I was trying to do, I was getting stripped or shoved. But that is supposed to be an elusive move to avoid those defensive moves in Jam on Fire Edition. But they were just, the AI is just so ruthless that it didn't really matter what I was doing, but did manage to elude them a couple of times with a Mutombo crossover of all things. But yeah, trying to carry the load with Mutombo, not having that outside shot obviously in the game, you're just going to get some garbage buckets and some easy ones inside. And I was a bit confused by that matchup. It didn't dawn on me at first, but then I looked at who was on the court and I thought, I don't recognize the year that's being represented here. But so it is kind of a mashup of a few years there. I think it's because there is a limited amount of players that you can include in that mod. There's only so you're limited by the players that you can replace. So I know some of those players appear on other teams. So I'm guessing that's why there's a bit of a mashup there.
It seems like that's the case. And you know what? That's fine. It works.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it was still fun. And most of the matchups are accurate as far as your specific and whatnot. And you know what's amazing about that mod is, did you notice that all the courts were right? Did you notice that the doorknobs looked great? Yeah. Did you notice that all the cyber faces were perfect, like Jokic and Murray, who are obviously not in the default version of that game? So, you can really get immersed in it. When we were playing that 1992 Cavs-Bulls matchup, it felt like we were playing, a game that was really representing by default that 1992 season. Like I said, that's the telltale sign of a great mod, when you forget it's a mod, right? It looks like it's part of the regular game. So, yeah, I love that road trip. I really enjoyed those sessions, and we're definitely going to have to continue that road trip.
It's so addictive, as you said. Even with the losses, you want to make up for it. You want to get that victory and end on a good note.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many games did we play? I thought we were only going to connect for 20 to 25 minutes, and I think we ended up playing for an hour and 15.
Easily.
I kept messaging Andrew on Twitter. I said, one more. Want to play one more?
Yeah.
Can you stay up for one more? I'm actually probably the reason Andrew's sick, because I kept him up and he wasn't able to get much sleep, because I just kept asking him to play another one. And that's also a mark of a great co-op game, right? Not all basketball video games are great for cooperative play, but the shared experience on NBA Jam on Fire Edition, much like the original NBA Jam, right? Like NBA Jam and then NBA Jam TE, like, just the gameplay is so good for that style.
It is. And, of course, we do have that journey going in the original NBA Jam, the Super Nintendo version. And That's pretty brutal too. So this is kind of a throwback to that original, very tough AI.
Exactly, and we're going to have more footage uploaded of those classic arcade games to the NLSC YouTube.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So, Andrew, let's get to the next topic. And this one's concerning, and I'll explain why. So Herb Scribner, who's been covering NBA 2K24 in depth throughout its release cycle, sent a tweet, and he stated, Take-Two Interactive said in its quarterly earnings call Thursday that it had earned $1.35 billion in its fourth quarter with outperformance in NBA 2K24, its lead contributor. So the company saw a 3% drop compared to the same quarter last year, but their largest contributors to earnings and revenue included NBA 2K24 and NBA 2K23. For fiscal year 2024, Take-Two had a 1% increase compared to last year, with NBA 2K24 being one of the biggest contributors to its growth. And one of the comments, the most popular comment under that tweet is, "We ain't never getting a good 2K again." And then somebody said, "RIP to the community that got me through high school." And just a lot of people, basically upset that 2K24 has made Take-Two this much money and that it's had so much success, because they feel like, you know what? The game is just going to keep regressing. The game is just going to keep being greedy, all of that stuff. And I don't blame them. Like I stated in a quote tweet, I said, outside of lawsuits, Take-Two has no incentive to stop their unfair and often predatory business practices.
And it goes back to something that I wrote about when I talked about the backlash to 2K24, is that it does feel like there's been more of a backlash this year. People are really getting fed up. They're speaking out. You're seeing a lot of people swearing off the game, etc. But at the same time, clearly a lot of people are still playing the game, and they are pumping money into it. And that's the thing, is
they don't have another option. They don't have another option.
Well, that is true, absolutely. But
how many people love basketball? It's a global sport. How many people want to get their hands on an NBA 5-on-5 game? Millions. Absolutely millions of fans out there. And the younger demographic, what else are they going to do? They want to hop online and play with their friends. They want to, get some games in with their favorite NBA players and teams and whatnot. It's just, there's only one option.
Oh, for sure. It's what we need to have, these options in the space. But to that point, unfortunately, people are not boycotting the microtransactions. They are still giving into that. They're not saying, well, you know what? We'll play the game because we want to play a basketball game, but we're going to go no money spent. So the people are still giving in. And I've got an article that's coming out it'll probably next month, or maybe I'll schedule it in the next couple of weeks. But I myself, Derek, did buy some VC the other week because I needed to get into an online game to get some screenshots to talk about an issue that I've seen other people talk about. To actually get into a game, I needed to upgrade quickly, so I bought a small amount of VC for the first time in years, and as I'm going to go into detail in this article, I'm not happy that I did, not happy that I broke my own rule to do so, but I can just do that as a once-off, Derek, for the purposes of content creation. But there's a lot of people who are being pressured to do this constantly, year after year, and to upgrade as quickly as possible because they actually are interested in getting to much higher than I was. I just got up to 72 overall so I could get into a game so that people would actually want to play with me when I stepped into the rec for a quick session to get these screenshots and clips for future content creation purposes. But people who don't have that impulse control, people who do want to play the game, they are they're just pumping money into the game, and I'm never going to blame consumers for that. But at the same time, it shows that it's very difficult to take a stand because people do feel that pressure, and they do want to play the game, they do want to upgrade, they do want to get the cards. So for all the backlash, unfortunately, it hasn't blown up in 2K's face. We can shout at them until we're as hoarse as I sound right now, but unfortunately, it's just not making a difference, and that is very disheartening.
Andrew, what do you expect the average person to do?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you expect the average person to think that they can do or think that they can accomplish? The average person is, as far as playing NBA 2K, and you know this as well as I do, the average demographic are teenagers, right? Or super young adults. Do you really think that these people are going to make a stand? Do you really think that they could produce a successful boycott?
Yeah.
And really of any age, it's not just the younger crowd. Do you really think that this young demographic has the know-how to put a lawsuit together?
Exactly.
Or, to understand how to take a company like this to court, or how to file a legal complaint in general.
And if all your friends are playing,
to make enough noise. Right. We're strapped, right? Like the gaming community doesn't feel like we can beat this. The company is too big.
Yeah.
Right. So I want, let's look at this in realistic terms. It's not as easy as saying boycott them. Right. Their target audience is the most vulnerable. Right. They're the most vulnerable people. They're the younger crowd, and they have enough going on. These kids are in school. Sometimes they're in school and working. Sometimes they're, just working, but they're working 40 to 60 hours a week and whatnot. And do you think that anybody has the time and energy to really combat this and make enough of a stink? Right. Or yeah, exactly. Or grind. So what happens is they don't want to grind either because they don't have the time between all of the stuff that they're doing. So they're going to pony up, right? They're going to put money into the game. And that's why NBA 2K24 is so successful, right? And that's why their recent releases, even though they've been subpar, and I think poor, incredibly poor overall from a gameplay perspective, that's why they have so much success, is because they've cornered the marketplace. There's only one NBA 5-on-5 title for these kids to get, and they, the Take-Two knows that. Hell, people love basketball globally.
It's still popular. It's still a popular brand.
Right. And whatnot. But Take-Two also knows that by making the game grindy and throwing all these gambling mechanics in there and, basically dangling the bait in front of consumers saying, hey, you could get this 100 overall card and dominate. Yeah. You could get this high overall card. You could. Right. But, you're going to have to take a chance here. But, man, if you get this card, look at it. It's flashy. Right? Like they know that if they dangle that bait in front of people and they give kind of this promise of you're going to look cool, or your content's going to look cool as a result, or, you're going to be able to talk smack on the mic once you beat somebody down in online play or whatever, then, most people of this younger crowd are going to bite. And that's why this game is making so much money. And I do feel bad for the consumer because, like I said, I think the average consumer, they feel like they can't fight this. And I also want to point out Troyden, again, who has about 800K followers on Twitter, stated, and this was on May 12th, he said, until something changes with these terrible practices, today will be my final NBA 2K video ever. And again, that's a terrible look for the company. This is probably the biggest My Team content creator they've ever had, right?
Yeah.
Just his popularity, the amount of views his videos get, his following, etc. And that tweet that he sent out got 1.2 million views, and the most popular reply to it was 2K got to listen to one of their biggest creators, and it has over 1,000 likes. But they're not listening to Troyden, because if Troyden says something like this, like he did, it's not impacting 2K's bottom line, right? Because all the issues that I just talked about prior to bringing up that tweet, they're all still there, right? But, even the biggest creators, Next Makers have been speaking out, the biggest 2K content creators are speaking out, and nothing changes. And why? Because they're just going to keep making money.
And that is the depressing part about it. That again, you have this big content creator, and he's not the only one speaking out, but he is one of the most prominent, saying that he's not going to have anything to do with the game, that he's not going to make any more videos on it, he's not going to promote my team or the game in general. And you still wonder if that's going to make a dent. And all of the backlash, all of the attempts at a boycott or encouraging people to go no money spent seem to be for naught. It is very discouraging. Lele Murray, content creator as well, has been involved with the Next Maker program, also Lamont Murray's daughter, as it happens, has also given some insight into how there's teams at 2K working on the city or my career or whatever, not really interested in community feedback. They'll take community feedback on gameplay, but they're just not interested in anything else. They're just going to do what they're going to do, whatever decisions they've already made. They know they can get away with it. As you said, there's only one game on the market, so they can do what they want to do, and we can either like it or not play the game. And obviously there are people who are saying, well, I'm not going to have anything more to do with the game, but plenty of other people are taking their place, and the cycle repeats.
Yeah, so I don't think they're taking much gameplay feedback either.
True, probably
from these people, because all these legacy issues exist, and then there's new issues that are added to the games. And I think the shooting was the worst that it's ever been in 2K basketball history, in NBA 2K24. I think the movement is absolutely still piss poor as far as the suction and the skating and the jerky movement and the ball warping and all of that. Like, if they are taking in feedback from, next makers or, the community in general, they're not taking in the right feedback. But I don't think I've ever seen anybody ask for all of these, poor decisions in relation to gameplay. But yeah, I think that even people in the Next Maker program, I feel bad for at times, because I think that I'm sure that they've brought up issues at times, like your example there, related to the gambling mechanics, the predatory mechanics, the unfair my team practices. In fact, we've seen multiple tweets from Next Makers kind of calling out the unfair practices in my team, but they fall on deaf ears. And why? Because anything that will negatively impact Take-Two's bottom line, they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So it's just super unfair.
Yeah, and I absolutely believe what Lele Murray has to say about them not wanting certain feedback, because I've had that experience myself with EA, with NBA Live back in the day. It got to a certain point where the old guard was saying, look, Dynasty has to be deep. We need roster editing and roster sharing, and we need more authenticity in the NBA side of gameplay, and it can't just be all about the streets and the one. And they didn't want to hear it by the end. So that's why one of the reasons why a lot of the old guard of content creators and supporters of the series, longtime fans and people who were very passionate about giving feedback, were shouldered out. Were given the cold shoulder and not listened to anymore, because we weren't giving them the feedback that they wanted. I mean, we obviously would give them feedback on those issues, but we were also talking about things that they just decided, we don't care about. We're not going to go in that direction. How does that work out for NBA Live? Just putting that out there again. But I absolutely believe that she's running into these issues, she and other people who've been involved in the Next Maker program, because I've been there where developers and community reps have basically said, yeah, we just don't want to hear about that.
Imagine not listening to ideas like that promote people spending more time on the game, giving them more tools at their disposal related to customization, and community-related items, right? That can build a community, things like roster sharing.
Yeah.
Right? Sharing custom rosters, creating custom rosters, having a deep franchise where you want to make videos for YouTube and create content for and show off and all of that. Yeah, that's embarrassing for EA, in my opinion. The fact that they even came out with NBA Live 15, 16, 18, and 19 and had absolutely no roster sharing options. And even in Live 19, just super basic editing options.
And buggy, as well. It was bugged as well.
Yeah, and it was super bugged, and you really couldn't do anything.
No.
Right? That's embarrassing for the company. And anybody who tried to, whether it's suits or developers or whatever, who tried to shut out those people who had those ideas and who didn't listen to them, I'm sorry, but you're not too bright.
No.
Because in my opinion,
Speak for itself.
Is like those are some of the most basic features that should be included in sports games for the reasons that I stated. So, yeah, I mean, look what that did for the series, right?
Yeah, it says it all.
Stop,
says it all.
Gears off. And now we haven't had a game since NBA Live 19. So maybe you should listen to Andrew and I. Maybe you should listen to the community who is saying the most obvious and right things, the stuff that would be right for your game. And I'm talking to you, 2K, as well. I'm talking to Take-Two.
Yeah, long-time fans who actually know the games, and also people who are in the community and talking to other people in the community and know what their fellow gamers want. It's not just us speaking for ourselves and other people like us, not just trying to be egotistical about this or get clout. We are expressing views, obviously, that we believe in, but we know that we're not alone in these desires, in these wants for the game, and that's why we're putting forward this feedback, and that's why it was so disappointing to lose that in with EA and realize, they're just not interested unless it's about this mode that we're telling them, hey, it's this crowd you're going for, they're already playing 2K, and 2K is already doing other things that cater to everybody, and you're not doing that. And yeah, the proof is in the pudding. As you said, we haven't had a live game since Live 19, going on 6 years, going on 4 years since they actually said anything about the future of the series, or 5 years probably, actually, thinking back to that tweet on the official NBA Live X account as it is now. But yeah, 2K is obviously in a better position. They're in a position where it's going to be very difficult to fail. We don't want them to fail. We just want them to do better. We want them to be fairer to consumers. But with these record profits, Derek, it's bleak. Nothing has to change, and that's unfortunate.
Think about this. How long do you think you or I would last in like a 2K Next Maker program or in the EA content creator program?
Oh, we're screened out already.
No. But I'm saying like how? Yeah, I am obviously, but like I don't think I could last a week because I would try to bring up an issue. Or I would try to say, hey, listen, this shouldn't be in the game, and
exactly.
Or we need to tweak this or whatever. And the moment where I get kind of like pushback or somebody snobby says, we're not going to do that, or that's not what's right for the game, or focus on this, don't focus on that, I would be just out.
Yeah.
Right. Like because
done.
There's a lot, Andrew. There's a lot of know-it-alls in this business, right? And there's also a lot of people in business that are in that particular business for the wrong reasons. And there's also a lot of button pushers who will basically push whatever buttons are possible to make the suits happy, and will do what they're told in order to satisfy the higher-ups on their goals of trying to make the most money, hit the bottom line, right? Like, I couldn't be that person if the direction wasn't right, if they weren't creating a true game that's about the community and doing the best thing for the consumer. And I still, to this day, Andrew, my opinion on this is, if you make a game, and there's a game like Baldur's Gate, remember I talked about this, if you create a game that is right for the consumer, that's fair to the consumer, that gives them editing tools and sharing tools that promote community and allow them to share their content or create content for themselves or their family and friends, et cetera, if they're local and whatnot. Like, I truly believe that you can be a super profitable company and, keep pushing out games every year with that mindset and direction that are profitable. Like, I really, really, truly believe that. And there's a lot of games out there that show that. There's proof of concept. Remember, we've talked about games like Rocket League. I talked about Baldur's Gate. There's so many games out there that are not filled with microtransactions, that have the appropriate community aspect to them, that have awesome, super awesome gameplay and whatnot, and they're profitable. So I just don't want to hear that this stuff is necessary.
It's definitely not, but they have found a very profitable model. And yeah, unfortunately, it's not going to change. We'll always speak out against it. We'll always encourage people to go no money spent, even though I did invest in that small amount of VC for content creation purposes. Again, not very happy that I did it. I'll go into more detail in my article about that. But the fact that I did that, the fact that I had to do that to get the game, to get those screenshots, those clips, Derek, it shows the whole it's optional excuse. No, it's not optional. It is technically, but realistically, feasibly, it's not. And they're just taking advantage of that, and they're going to keep taking advantage of that because it's working out way too well for them, sadly.
And so the last thing I'm going to say about that is there were a few responses to my quote tweet related to Herb Scribner's comments. The Live King stated, YouTubers trying to get the 100 rated cards. Yeah, I mean, we've seen Troyden's one of them, but other YouTubers spending thousands of dollars opening packs trying to get a 100 overall card on camera. And so you see how bad those pack odds are. You see how, that's making 2K rake in the money related to these microtransactions and whatnot. At Jeff Cortines, of course, Rock states fact. So he obviously agrees that, without lawsuits, these practices are just going to continue. And then NC to the Bone makes a interesting comment, and I agree with part of this. He says they only doing what's allowed. Until these companies start to feel it in their pockets, no changes will happen. All I know is for myself, I don't indulge in those parts of the game. I never felt like I had to buy. So if he's playing mostly offline and he's playing using like the all-time teams rosters and doing roster editing and maybe using the classic teams and maybe jumping into my league and whatnot, he's probably not going to notice it that much, right? It's very connected to the online modes. It's very connected to my career. Park, obviously, my team, obviously now my NBA errors is tied into the TOS, etc. But his first comment there saying they only doing what's allowed. And that's the unfortunate part, right, is they get away with it.
Yeah.
And he's right.
No regulation. Yeah.
Right. Consumers are allowing this, but they also feel like they have no way of fighting this. And the majority of the people that are playing this game, the demographics, have absolutely no idea how to fight this, right? So, I definitely agree with that point. But, for this week's mailbag question, I asked what NBA stars are, tough to use in basketball video games, historically and present and whatnot. And, I went to put on NBA 2K23 not thinking because I was going to grab some attributes to use as examples. And what's the thing that popped up right in my face, Andrew, because those servers are still online? That new TOS. So I was kind of disgusted by it based on all of the recent happenings with NBA 2K. So I Control-Alt-Deleted out of the game and didn't accept it. So the examples that I actually pulled are from NBA 2K22 because I really just didn't feel like either agreeing or disagreeing to that TOS at this time. I didn't even want to look at it. So that's unfortunately the state of NBA 2K today for me.
No, absolutely. And obviously we've spoken about this issue before. It is something that's always worth bringing up. As difficult as it is to start a boycott or a movement, it is still worth putting out there, letting people know how predatory it is, and keeping each other informed, and not just accepting it without some resistance, without some criticism, is absolutely vital. But let's wrap things up by opening up the mailbag.
To the mailman, the pump fake. What an unbelievable dunk!
So yeah, I'll state again, Andrew. I asked the community which NBA stars were harder to use in video games than they should be. And this topic suggestion was submitted by Live 01 legend Nate Stasio. So this is a great topic suggestion. We definitely encourage the community to basically, let us know if there's something that you want us to talk about on the NLSC podcast, and we'd love to entertain that idea. So, Andrew, I came up with just a few quick examples, and then I'll throw it over to you. Larry Bird, and the biggest reason why it's so tough to use Larry Bird in the newer 2K games, and when I say the newer 2K games, I would probably say from NBA 2K 18 through NBA 2K 24. The biggest reason is because of how slow they make him, unrealistically slow. And they always make his ball control or ball handle rating, depending on which game it is, a little bit too low. They make his speed with ball, for example, in NBA 2K22, only 64, his acceleration 67, and his speed 67. So if you combine all of those lower ratings, it makes for a lethargic player. in these newer NBA 2Ks. It makes him slower than he was in real life. It makes him not be able to get by somebody. Even if he throws a pump fake and somebody falls for it, he'll end up getting stuck on him as he's trying to go by. He can't really do anything as far as putting the ball on the floor. And you basically are stuck with Larry Bird just kind of doing fadeaways or taking completely wide open shots, which is not realistic for Larry Bird, who was an incredibly versatile offensive player. And while he didn't have a great handle, he definitely was quick enough, especially on that, the 85-86 version, even in the early 90s, Andrew, if you watch him in that game when he scored 49 against the Portland Trailblazers in 91, 92, in the playoffs against the Pacers in 91 and stuff, you can still see that he had enough quickness to get by defenders at times. And he was strong, and he could create his own shot. So Larry Bird from like 2K18 to 2K24 has been way harder to use than he should be. And that's quite different than the way he was in the early mid-2000s NBA Lives. And I think you would agree, where he was either on the all-decade teams or in a Legends free agent pool and whatnot. That Larry Bird can hit shots from all over the floor, guarded, etc. You can get by your defender with him. You can dunk a little bit too often with him, actually. But in those older NBA Live games, Larry is an absolute machine. So it's interesting how that works. But Larry Bird is really tough to use over the last 6 or 7 games for NBA 2K.
I mean, undercooked Legends ratings, inaccurate Legends ratings, I think are a recurring issue. Obviously, that leads to 2 of my examples, actually, a 2-for-1 example here. With NBA 2K21 My Team, Ralph Sampson. With NBA Live 18 Ultimate Team, Hakeem Olajuwon. Former teammates, obviously, which is another reason why I'm going 2-for-1 here. In Live 18, look, you know how much I love my Live 18 Ultimate Team with all those 90s legends, but trying to hit a mid-range jumper with Hakeem. Now, Hakeem did have a shooting touch. We've talked about this in previous shows. We've talked about how Mario Elie has said that he was able to smoke threes in practice. It just wasn't really the done thing in games. If you want to have a lower three-point rating for Hakeem because he wasn't a prominent three-point shooter, that's fine. But to have a low mid-range rating just absolutely nerfs his ability to work outside of the post. And obviously he was a tremendous post-up player, but he was also hitting those mid-range jumpers. With low mid-range ratings, you can't really do what Hakeem did in Live 18. And the same with Ralph Sampson in 2K21. He has such horrible speed ratings and quickness ratings, and he was a tremendous athlete, as you know, Derek. But
ridiculous. Ralph Sampson was flying up and down the court.
Exactly.
Even faster than we see Wembanyama. I've actually shown highlights of Ralph Sampson in the All-Star game in the mid-'80s, but also in regular games against the Celtics and whatnot. He was like a gazelle getting up and down the court. One of his biggest strengths was the fact that he was 7'4", long, lengthy, but had that super athleticism.
Exactly.
Ridiculous. Yeah. And not to interrupt you, but this also makes me upset because I did see the low Hakeem mid-range rating, and I made a comment at the time about it, and I think this was in NBA Live 18 and NBA Live 19. Listen, Hakeem Olajuwon was an absolute knockdown mid-range shooter. Knockdown. They had to cover him all the way up to the elbow and even a little bit further out. Just like Patrick Ewing, you could not leave Hakeem open for mid-range. It was one of the biggest strengths of his game because it made him even more versatile, right? Because he could take you back to the basket, or he could take you in the mid-range, and he could pump fake and then take you off the dribble. I have footage of Hakeem consistently getting people up in the air from 18 feet and dribbling into the lane and throwing it down, right? I have an example of him doing that actually on Robert Parrish and whatnot, and I want to say it was in the late 80s. So when you take the mid-range game out of people like players like Hakeem, it takes a huge part of his ability away on the court, so you can't use him like real life. And Ralph Sampson was another guy, Andrew, who absolutely had that mid-range shot. He had to be guarded out there in college and in the NBA, but the game makes him absolutely piss poor from mid-range. And there's actually a lot of players in the all-time teams and the 80s and 90s and 70s teams and whatnot that they gave absolutely terrible mid-range shooting ratings, and whether it be contested or open shot, etc. And these players relied heavily on that mid-range shot in real life. A guy like that, one of them is Larry Nance. right? Larry Nance could obviously hit that mid-range shot, and it was something that he could rely on consistently. But good luck buying a mid-range shot with Larry Nance when his rating is in the early 60s, right? Yeah. In the low 60s in the NBA 2K games. So what they did was they basically made these players only be able to be used like around the rim and every now and then on a post-up, and it's definitely frustrating.
And it does depend on how the mechanics work, what the threshold for ratings is on the dice roll if you don't get that perfect release, whether you can get a perfect release with them, with that rating, obviously, that all comes into play. With Live 18, it's also very... What they consider a mid-range shot, even when you're in the post with Akeem, if you're just a step too far out when you're doing a bit of a dream shake and doing a turnaround fadeaway, it'll call that a mid-range shot sometimes, and so now you've gone from the post rating to the mid-range shot rating, and you get screwed over by that. So that's another problem with that low rating. It's not even just, I mean, obviously it's a problem taking actual clear mid-range jumpers, but when it calls a post shot a mid-range jumper as well, and it's kind of questionable whether you would actually call it mid-range, it's definitely closer to a post shot at that point, then you get screwed over by that rating. And Ralph Sampson, trying to play with him in 2K21 My Team with those slow ratings, they've basically given him a Chuck Nevitt speed rating and quickness rating, and just trying to make moves, run the floor with him is just impossible. And obviously in other modes you can change those ratings, but in My Team or Ultimate Team, you're stuck. If the animations are wrong, if ratings are wrong, that card is buggy. It's not as effective as it should be.
And like you said, the animations are a big part of this. So like in NBA 2K, they always give Akeem this ridiculous set shot where he's barely leaving the ground and he's just shooting it from his forehead. And it looks absolutely nothing like Akeem's real shot. In real life, Akeem Olajuwon has a jump shot, right? Like he gets off the ground and he creates separation as a result. And he's got a beautiful shot. But in the game, good luck getting a shot off when somebody's right up in front of you, because basically you don't have a shot because he's just shooting a set shot. You talked about mid-range issues. Sean Kemp, mid-range shot rating in NBA 2K22 for the 95-96 Sonics, a 60. Good luck, right? And what do we know about Sean Kemp from the mid-late 90s? Man was a gunner oftentimes from mid-range. He averaged like 20 points a game with the Cavs, and a large portion of his arsenal was from that mid-range, Andrew. He had to be respected out there, but they make it so he can barely hit one every now and then. And then David Robinson is rated as a C- on mid-range. And you and I both know what was one of David Robinson's go-tos, that face-up, right? And just shooting it over the defender. But good luck being an effective mid-range shooter with David Robinson. So I think that the historical content in the NBA 2K games, and I think this has been going on for 8 or 9 years at least, it's just low priority, right? They don't consider it a high priority. They have the likeness for the player in the game as far as his looks and being able to put in his vitals and all of that stuff. And they think that's going to be, basically good enough for the consumer, and that they can get by with basically just not having the knowledge behind the rosters and not having the accuracy as far as the way players play. And it's pretty unfortunate. So I'm going to bring up a couple examples here. Dirk Nowitzki on the 0203 Mavericks in NBA 2K22. Get this, Andrew. So Dirk in 0203, he would routinely bring up the ball, right? He was a one-man fast break that year.
Oh, yeah.
He was rugged that year. He was a tremendous athlete. I'm going to say it here on the podcast. He was a tremendous athlete that year. And you go back and watch the footage, and he would routinely beat Nash and Finley up the floor. He was a gazelle. He was in ridiculously great shape back then. And his speed with ball in this game is 25.
Yeah, lowest.
25. That's the lowest you can get. He is an absolute slug with the ball. His speed is only 46. That's his speed without the ball. He is basically lethargic all the way up the floor. He is a slug. His lateral quickness is 33 and his acceleration is 40. And his ball handle is only 57, which means he can't do anything with the ball. Absolutely insulting to Dirk. Any version of Dirk, to be completely honest with you. But the 0203 Dirk Nowitzki, give me a break. And also, if he was that slow, even in 10-11, do you think that he would have been able to do everything that he did to Serge Ibaka in that Thunder series or throughout that playoffs and whatnot? The stuff he did to Chris Bosh in the finals and that Miami Heat team? Get out of here with that. So insulting to Dirk. And the thing with NBA 2K22 is you would expect them to give Dirk a little bit more attention because he was one of the cover athletes, right?
Yeah, new face
for
and
the Legends
yeah.
edition. It was him and new face and everything. Instead, they just basically crapped on him still and just copy and pasted his ratings from other 2Ks. But Dirk, historically harder to use than he should be, especially since, again, 2K18. And, it sucks.
Yeah, whenever they get incorrect shooting ratings, incorrect speed ratings, and that does happen a lot with the Legends players and the historical players, undercooking these players who were fine athletes. Okay, are they the fastest ever in NBA history? No, but they're not slugs either, to your point. And it's just very frustrating. Obviously, you can fix that in the rosters, but if you are playing a card-collecting mode, My Team, Ultimate Team, again, you're stuck.
Exactly. And I also wanted to bring up shooting animations that have killed players to go along with some of their other ratings, but specifically with these players, it was the shooting animations that were provided to them by NBA 2K. And again, I'm using 2K22 as an example, and I believe that these animations are still tied to the players in NBA 2K24. Dominique Wilkins, who, as you know, one of the big aspects of his game is that mid-range shot. Right. You've seen him score 30 and 40 points and whatnot. And a large portion of that arsenal is him pulling up from mid range. And he has that jump shot. He gets high up on his shot. But in NBA 2K, they have him with jump shot 8, which is a gathering set shot, and release 75, which is shooting from his nose. And he's barely leaving the ground. He's just like kind of awkwardly like hopping forward on the shot, and it's absolutely nothing like Dominique Wilkins. So you took out a big portion of Dominique Wilkins' game by just being lazy, right? All they had to do was give him a jump shot where he actually can shoot up over the defense that looked relatively similar to what he had in real life, and I have one assigned to him in the game, and whatnot, because I fixed a lot of the players. But yeah, it's just lazy, right? And it's a disservice to Neek. And Latrell Sprewell has something similar. In real life, he has this beautiful shot where it's an actual jump shot, and he releases the ball, more over his head. But they have him with jump shot 4 and release 58, which is a set shot. And they did the same thing with Clyde Drexler. Clyde Drexler, and this is from NBA 2K22 through NBA 2K24, has a set shot in the video game where he's barely leaving the ground and it looks nothing like his real shooting form. So good luck getting shots off with those guys who could shoot in the mid-range in those games. It completely disables them from those areas. And there's a lot of examples of that, so we don't need to go into every single one. But yeah, the shot animation absolutely matters.
Yeah, as you say, trying to get a shot over a defender, that's where you run into, elbow blocks and body blocks are obviously a problem at the best of times, but when you have a player who's supposed to be able to leap over defenders and get that clearer shot, you just get so many more easy blocks against you when you don't have the right jump shot animation.
Exactly. I also want to point out that one of the biggest issues with these players in NBA 2K is low ball control ratings, low speed, low acceleration, and low speed with ball. If you have low ratings in all of those, you often are just useless in the game. Because if you combine all of that sluggishness with guys like Joe Dumars, who is not sluggish at all, right? And other players like him, like Michael Finley, who listen to what they did to Michael Finley, who was an amazing athlete. He was in the dunk contest. He was a fast, athletic wing. They gave him a speed of 63 on that 02-03 Mavericks team. Andrew, 63. And speed with ball, 63, acceleration, 73. And they also give him a set shot. And his ball handle is only 78, so he can't really create anything off the dribble either. So Michael Finley, you've just taken his whole game away, pretty much. But, I think that those ratings just being low is a killer for so many different players in that game. And it usually is tied to players in the historical rosters because they're rushed and the person that's working on them doesn't give a crap, or they don't want to, take the time to watch footage and make things right. And I also want to, before I throw it back to you, they have Clyde Drexler with a 71 on acceleration by default. 71, Andrew. Clyde Drexler, and only 74 on speed. How fast was Clyde Drexler?
Just get up and down the court, yeah.
Ridiculous up and down the court. Joe Dumars, they only have him with a 67 on speed, 69 on acceleration, 69 on speed with ball. And he was excellent at shooting guard and was very quick and fast in the open floor. The one that's the most insulting to me is often when I look at these rosters is Daryl Dawkins, and he's on that 76, 77, 76ers team. In real life, he had a jump shot where he shot over his head and could routinely hit that mid-range shot. They gave him set shot 17, release 46, so he's not even leaving the ground on his shot. And they gave him a mid-range rating of D-, Andrew. Mid-range shot rating of 55. His ball handle is 45. His speed with ball is 47, and his lateral quickness is 45. Daryl Dawkins, without edits, plays absolutely nothing like his real-life counterpart in the video game. But hey, they got a cyberface for him, right? So it's Daryl Dawkins.
More or
so, I mean, I hope that sometimes people who work on NBA 2K, that they listen to this show. And people that might be able to say something, or somebody that might even work on the rosters, because you guys have people that will fix these rosters who have the historical knowledge and will put in the work, and they'll do it for free, right?
But politics, that's the problem.
But yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. Politics. They also want to make the historical teams, in my opinion, play worse than today's teams, even if it means making the players slower and less athletic than they really were and worse than they really were in order to try to make a point. I'm sure that that's part of it. To be completely honest with you, I'm sure that there's some sort of agenda there, because I just don't see any other reason why they would do that to somebody like Michael Finley, right? Or that they would do that to somebody like Daryl Dawkins, or to the 02-03 Dirk, or to the teams of the 80s and 90s and whatnot. So that is a lot of ranting for me on this episode, but you can kind of see where I'm frustrated there.
Oh, absolutely. And we know how these players are supposed to play, so when they're clearly designed to be less effective and less talented, skilled, or athletic as they should be, then it's absolutely frustrating. We mentioned mechanics, and if there is an issue with the way the dice roll on jump shots, the mechanics, dribbling mechanics, or just player movement in general, it obviously impacts the way certain stars play. And another example that comes to mind is when the mechanics don't allow players who defy the odds, if you will, to really dominate as they've been able to in real life. And shorter players come to mind. You brought up Allen Iverson, obviously, in Jam on Fire Edition, and that's been the case in some of the sim games as well. Isaiah Thomas is another example. And that's the Isaiah Thomas that came along in 2011 that I'm referring to specifically here, under 6 foot. Although he did grow to 6'1" in my 2K14 my career, Derek. I don't know how that happened, but he did. Late growth spurt, I guess. But having those shorter players, the ones that were able to get into the lane and finish over bigger defenders and play bigger than their size, can't always do that on the virtual hardwood.
Yeah, it was Isaiah Thomas, actually, who was playing NBA 2K17, and he was actually playing it on the Jumbotron before a game. I think this was during NBA 2K17's release cycle, and I think he was playing the game with a fan and whatnot, and he actually switched off from using himself in the game because he said that he wasn't able to use himself like real life. So Isaiah Thomas himself was saying that at the time. Yeah, there's a lot of small guards that, and one of them, the example is like Joe Dumars, right? Like there's a lot of guards in the 2K games over the recent years that you can't use even close to their real life counterpart. And it's mostly the ones on the historical rosters because they, like I stated, their acceleration, their speed with ball, their speed, their ball control are all too low and it disables them from doing the stuff that they could do in real life. And then also when they get into the paint, what happens to those guards, Andrew? They get sucked into big guys, right? Oftentimes big guys with badges like rim protector and whatnot. And you can't get shots off with them. They're useless around the rim. You're basically restricted to trying to do a floater every single time you go to the hoop in order to get a shot off, or at least a capable shot that can go in. So I definitely agree there.
So those are some of the examples that come to mind for us. Let's see what the community had to say. Colin, a.k.a. Ghost Panda, said Sean Marion, but mostly because of that jump shot, LOL. And that's a fair point as well, Derek, that even if you do have the right jump shot animation, some jump shots are harder to time, harder to get the timing down for and learn the ideal release point than others. And Sean Marion, certainly with that unique style, shall we say, could throw you for a loop.
I think in a way it's realistic because you actually watched Sean Marion throughout his career, in order to get off a three and whatnot, he did need to have a little bit more space, right? Because when you're releasing the ball from that low, you have a much higher chance of getting blocked. He ended up being a very capable 3-point shooter, actually, at a couple of points in his career. I think one thing with Sean Marion is, depending on the series you're playing, I think he's been a little bit too slow in basketball video games, and his ball handling rating too low, which makes it so it's hard to make moves with him on the perimeter. But if you remember correctly, one of Sean Marion's biggest strengths was the catch and go, right? He would catch it and either up fake and drive or just go right off of the catch. And in a lot of video games, you can't do that with him.
And Phil Lime, 2K, says Nikola Jokic, because he is slow and his high-passing attributes don't give us a huge advantage as much as in real life unless we want to do outlet passes. That's why I don't play with him in Play Now Online. And Nate Starshow, who suggested this topic obviously, adds, that's how I felt using Kevin Love in 2K14. I just used him for catch-and-shoot threes. Yeah,
so Jokic, you can't really use him like in real life in the video games because he likes to oftentimes grab the board, dribble the length of the court, and dish it to the wing, right? Or he'll switch hands with the dribble and throw it behind him, for a trailer three or something like that. But he's too sluggish and slow and methodical in the video game, so you can't really move like him, like he does, in real life. And I also think that in the video game, because the post game isn't very strong, in the most recent 2Ks, it's hard to execute realistic post moves with him, like going up for a half hook like he does, like those little flip shots that he's so effective doing, turning over the left and right shoulder and everything. I don't think that's as strong as it should be. And I also think that the shooting in the most recent 2Ks is incredibly frustrating, trying to, find the timing and finding when you need to release it. And I think that that's a disservice to a guy like Jokic, who can just hit shots in various ways all over the court. So I agree with him there.
And of course, issues like floaty passes, when Jokic is such a crisp passer, to his point, you can't take advantage of his passing skills.
Yeah, not only that, the AI does not move very realistic off the ball, in my opinion. So that's the other part of it. They're not, moving to the right spots like where his Denver Nuggets teammates would. Or, if you're playing my team with him, players are not moving off the ball the way they should. And to Nate's point about Kevin Love, Kevin Love is basically regulated to clean up around the hoop and 3-point shooting because he's not effective, in the video game in any other way.
Steven, the Live King, says Anthony Davis, for some reason in 2K, he was easier to use in NBA Live. I would say most superstar bigs in 2K, probably because the game ain't designed for the mid-range. And that goes back to our point about mid-range ratings and shooting mechanics.
Yeah, Anthony Davis loves that face-up game, right? And I think that 2K19 moving forward, they kind of destroyed the face-up game and mid-range game in the 2K series. Obviously, I've been able to do some edits to it on NBA 2K19, with ratings and slider tweaks and all of that stuff, where I've made the mid-range pretty fun again. But by default, out of the box, the mid-range game has gone basically extinct in the video game. And that is a disservice to people like Anthony Davis, who like to face up and hit that mid-range shot. I always thought the same thing about a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge, right? Like, for the games where mid-range wasn't as strong, LaMarcus Aldridge was basically rendered useless, and you couldn't use him like real life because LaMarcus Aldridge liked to take most of his shots in that face-up area, right? So I definitely see where he's coming from there.
Yeah, bigs, if they didn't have that strength rating and that dunking rating to just dominate inside, weren't necessarily as dominant as they should have been because they didn't have that shooting touch. Absolutely. Jumping over to our Facebook page now, Marco says, Dirk and Marc Gasol were trash in 2K14. Always played awful for me. And doesn't expand on that, but I imagine for the same reasons that we've talked about, having athletic ratings that don't allow them to use their footwork or the speed they had, more so Dirk than Marc Gasol, obviously, or indeed their shooting touch.
Dirk and Pau Gasol are always underdone in basketball video games. And this actually goes back to NBA Live, in my opinion, when he first came into the league in the early mid-2000s. I found that Pau Gasol was incredibly underwhelming. And it's because they always make Dirk and Pau slower than they were in real life. And they also made it so when they had the ball, they were just complete slugs.
Royce mentions Patrick Ewing and Akeem Olajuwon in games from, say, 2K6 through to 2K10. Also mentions Drexler not being able to really drive as effectively as he could. Mentions with current stars like Jokic in 2K21, the shot meter and those shooting mechanics. He mentions going 3 for 16 or something like that in the first half with Doncic in a game, just struggling again with those shooting mechanics. So again, a combination of athletic and shooting ratings. And again, the mechanics not allowing players to play like their real-life selves, at least in your hands. The CPU can obviously cheat the system much easier than we can, but if the mechanics don't allow it and the ratings don't allow it, that is a bad combination.
In my opinion, 2K6 through today, so to the current release, Patrick Ewing and Akeem Olajuwon are always underdone. They always have the wrong signature shot animation. They're always making them shoot ridiculous set shots that are hard to get off. They're always underdone in the mid-range. They're always not as fast as they should be. All the footwork's just not there, all of that. So I definitely see where he's coming from with those two. And yeah, like I said, Jokic with his real life shot making ability, he is way underdone in the video game as far as what you can do with him, and not even really from an attributes perspective, from memory, more just the mechanics of the game, right? Because of that suction, because of the way the shooting mechanics work, because of the skating and whatnot, and just the herky-jerky nature of NBA 2K nowadays. So, and Doncic, I just never really connected with in video games. I never was a strong performer with him. And it's maybe because I also don't really like his game in real life. I'm not sure.
And jumping into the Discord for a few more responses now. Juicy Shackmeat says, maybe I'm a bad gamer, but I had difficulties on 2K11 timing the jump shots of Larry Bird, Dirk Nowitzki, Carmelo Anthony, and Ray Allen. They're supposed to be the easiest to master because of their beautiful shooting forms. ZCB44 recently joined the Discord. Glad to have you there, ZC. Gotta be Larry Bird just with the jumper animation. Can never get the timing down consistently. Funnily enough, though, Sean Marion is one of my best. Played a game on one of the PS2 2K games recently, and he was by far my best scorer on what was a talented Suns team all around. And yeah, that's interesting because Colin said on Twitter that Sean Marion was one of the toughest, and for ZC, it's one of his best. But those animations, even when they are accurate, some of them aren't as easy to master. Going back to one of the free throw forms that Shaq had that we talked about last week, there is the one that is easier to shoot with, but the long wind-up on free throws, the one that the Shaq's free throw animation with the long wind-up is tough. So animations definitely can make things challenging.
I'm surprised Juicy Shackmeat mentioned Carmelo Anthony and Ray Allen. Those are the two of the ones that I pretty much light it up with in every video game. Not in the newest 2K, or actually not in 2K23 or 2K24 because of the absolutely piss-poor shooting mechanics that are not user-friendly or realistic at all. But in past NBA 2K titles, I've always lit it up with both of them, and in NBA Live titles. I think with the ones with the signature shot, my opinion is that Ray Allen's might be the easiest to shoot in basketball video game history, and Carmelo's is not completely accurate, but the base that they have for him is very accurate. So when I'm shooting with him, it definitely feels a lot like I'm shooting with Carmelo Anthony. I'm usually able to, time the release.
Carolus XCI says, Dirk was awful to use pretty much throughout the whole 2K series. He got an animation revival in 2K12, motivated by his title in 2011, which was cool, but he was always portrayed as a slow, lumbering big man, when in fact he was pretty much the quickest power forward of his generation, at least up to 2009 or so. Even 2003 Dirk in current 2Ks is pretty slow and useless. His jump shot animation, which by the way has been the same since 2K12, is super weird, with him jumping forwards, despite him being known for slightly jumping backward, depending on how close the defender was. So yeah, I always edited the crap out of him before putting him to use. Exactly what you said.
See, that tells me that Careless XCI knows his basketball, right? He knows his basketball history. He knows the NBA, and he knows Dirk, because that's exactly the way I look at it. Going up and down the floor, he was faster than any version of Kevin Garnett, especially that, like he stated, pre-2010 version of Dirk, the MVP Dirk, the, 0203 Dirk, 0102, etc. That man was faster up and down the floor by a sizable margin to Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett and even Chris Webber and whatnot. And he was also, more often than those guys, somebody who brought up the ball. So he actually had, a stronger handle than those power forwards that I just mentioned as well. I think he's been criminally underrated in video games related to his athleticism, his speed, his ball control, etc. And like Careless XCI stated, without edits, he's very much useless in basketball video games.
And finally, Kenny says Jamal Murray was pretty bad in NBA 2K23 My Team. The animation was slow, and even with a dark matter card, you couldn't hit a mid-range shot that was slightly contested. Admittedly, he's had his ups and downs this playoffs, but 2K23 was during the Nuggets title run when Murray was coming up big on a regular basis. So again, it's that recurring theme of the animations not being suitable, the shooting mechanics punishing contested shots to an insane degree, at least for the user. The CPU sometimes, although sometimes you can get it the other way, where any contested shot of the CPU, you can force them into a miss too easily as well, so that it does definitely go both ways. But shooting mechanics, the release system, whether it's reliant on a green release to be made, the animation and how that affects the ability to get green releases or good releases at the very least. Yeah, it's just a recurring issue. And yeah, Jamal Murray, the fact that even a dark matter card, one of your top uber cards in My Team, is still not as effective as it should be, speaks volumes.
Yeah, Jamal Murray is kind of a throwback guard in the sense that he really likes to step in and take that mid-range shot, right? He's also got a nice shooting for him. And he routinely hits contested and tough shots, for the Nuggets, either in the playoffs or in the regular season and whatnot. And one of the biggest weaknesses of the NBA 2K games since NBA 2K18, I would say, especially, that's when it really started, is the inability to hit semi-contested or contested shots, even with players that are more than capable of doing so. And sometimes that's reflected in the ratings if you look at their contested shot mid-range or contested shot 3 rating. But it's also just the mechanics of the game. And, it's hard to set your feet a lot of the time in the newer 2Ks because of the constant skating, since they implemented that new motion system in 2K18. And the fact that suction pushes you towards the defender or the defender towards you, creating a contest. And I also just want to point something out. If you played basketball in real life, you know that even in like local leagues, you'll know that contested shots go in consistently, right? If you ever watched an NBA game, contested shots go in a lot. And I understand that that's a hard balance to make in basketball video games. But at the same time, there's got to be a balance found where you can actually hit contested shots with these guys every now and then if you handle that shot correctly.
Oh, absolutely. And it's very frustrating when it is so reliant on the green release and when a well-defended shot, when the green release is taken away. That was a big problem in Live 19 after that last patch, trying to get good shooters, pretty much any star shooter in Live 19 against the CPU after that last patch. If the CPU defender was able to stick with you much easier than a human opponent, obviously, they'd get under you or get close enough to you to take away that green release, and suddenly you're missing shots that are pretty open and you should make. So all of those mechanics and the contest mechanics and shooting mechanics, it matters, and you can really nerf great players, great shooters, great athletes with bad mechanics and incorrect ratings. And you look at the responses we have, no surprise that there are some common themes there and some common players because they're being affected by those ratings mistakes and those mechanics over the years.
And this is also why custom rosters and the ability to roster share is so important.
Oh, yeah.
Because, there are a lot of knowledgeable people out there when it comes to basketball, and the NBA's past and making the attributes and signatures reflect that player's true abilities in real life. Unfortunately, game mechanics can still get in the way, which is why I still can't even play NBA 2K24, because the game just frustrates me and honestly want to throw my controller whenever I play it, because it doesn't feel like real basketball at all, and I think the mechanics suck in that game. But there are a lot of games out there, games like NBA 2K19, 2K17, 2K16, where if you make the right adjustments to the players and you make the appropriate slider tweaks and all of that stuff, you can make the players play like their real life counterpart. And I thought that was, we had a good example of that today on NBA 2K19 using that 85-86 roster. It felt like we were really using Jordan and Woolridge out there, right?
Yeah.
And we were getting, and that's what it's all about. So yeah, the ability to create custom rosters and share is key. And if EA ever comes back with NBA Live, and if they don't have roster sharing, that is going to be such a joke.
Yeah, they could stand to listen to us about a few things. I'll just put that out there.
Just a few.
But thank you to everybody who responded to Derek's prompt this week. Always great to have that conversation about these topics about basketball and basketball gaming. And yeah, keep the conversation going as always on social media, in our forum, and on the Discord. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us and, of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D for3G and at D for384. I'm on the NLSC, D for 3, and on YouTube, D for 3.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.